Daddy is in heaven. She goes, do you think I could go sometime? I said, baby, we will all go one day.
It's on Erika Kirk. What do you all think about her kids? Do you think her kids are still with her? Do you think that one of the kids possibly isn't Charlie's? 'Cause that's pretty much what's going on.
What happens when the loudest accusation doesn't come from the internet, but from someone who knows the private details? Because according to new claims now circulating online, Erika Kirk is being called out by her ex, who alleges she has abandoned her children with a nanny and hasn't seen them in weeks. No court filings shown publicly. No official custody documents released. Just a raw accusation, and the reaction has been explosive. This isn't a casual jab. It's a character challenge. The ex claims this isn't about work, travel, or temporary absence. He alleges a pattern: missed time, minimal contact, and responsibility quietly handed off to a caregiver while public appearances continued. And once that framing hit social media, the conversation changed fast. Because when accusations involve children, the audience doesn't wait for nuanced stock clips posts. And comments flooded timelines asking the same question. If this isn't true, why hasn't it been shut down? Silence followed. No immediate denial. No clarification. And silence, once again, gave the claims room to grow. Supporters pushed back, arguing that parenting looks different for public figures, that nannies are common, and that co-parenting disputes often turn ugly. Critics weren't moved. They said the issue isn't help, it's absence. And that's the word doing the damage. Abandoning doesn't mean delegation. It implies disconnection, so the real question isn't whether a nanny exists. It's whether the accusation of weeks-long absence is true, and if not, why the narrative is being allowed to spread unchecked. The allegations surrounding Erika Kirk didn't erupt because of a leaked document or a court filing. They erupted because of who made the claim and how it was framed. When accusations come from anonymous sources, audiences debate credibility. When they come from an ex-partner, especially one connected to the children involved, the reaction is immediate and emotional. According to statements circulating online, Erika's ex is alleging something very specific. Not just that a nanny is involved in childcare, but that Erika has physically not seen her children for weeks, while continuing public appearances and professional commitments. That distinction is critical. The controversy isn't about hiring help. It's about absence. And absence is what triggered the backlash. In modern parenting discourse, especially around public figures, nannies are normalized. Many parents celebrity or not rely on caregivers due to work schedules. But the ex's framing pushed the narrative beyond logistics and into neglect territory, even though no official finding has been presented. That framing is why this claim landed so forcefully. The ex reportedly argues that this isn't a temporary arrangement or a mutually agreed co-parenting schedule. He alleges a pattern where responsibility was delegated while emotional presence diminished. Whether that allegation is accurate is not established publicly, but the specificity of the claim gave it traction. Specific claims feel harder to dismiss. Another reason this hit hard is timing. These allegations surfaced amid ongoing scrutiny of Erika's public behavior and controversies. When multiple narratives collide: professional disputes, donor backlash, and now parenting accusations begin to look for a unifying explanation. That's dangerous territory, because unrelated issues get interpreted as evidence of a single character flaw. This is how escalation happens without proof. The ex's accusations also tapped into a sensitive cultural fault line: parental responsibility and gender expectations. Mothers, especially public ones, are judged more harshly for perceived absence than fathers. That double standard doesn't need to be fair to be effective. It needs to resonate emotionally. Online reactions reflected this immediately. Many commenters said things like, "If this were a father, people would excuse it as work." Others argued that the standard should apply equally. Either way, the conversation quickly shifted from facts to moral judgment. And once moral judgment enters, evidence becomes secondary. Supporters of Erika pushed back, noting that co-parenting disputes are often messy and weaponized. They argued that ex-partners sometimes exaggerate or selectively frame behavior to gain public sympathy or leverage. That's not an uncommon dynamic in contentious separations. But those defenses struggled to gain traction against the emotional weight of the accusation. Children changed the calculus. Another reason this allegation spread so fast is silence. At the time of the claim circulation, there was no immediate public response, clarifying custody arrangements, visitation schedules, or timelines. Silence doesn't confirm accusations, but it allows them to settle. In the absence of counterinformation, the loudest version becomes the default. This doesn't mean Erika is obligated to respond publicly. Parenting arrangements are private for a reason. But in the online environment, privacy often looks like evasion to critics, even when it's appropriate. The ex's claims also blurred the line between personal grievance and public accountability. On one hand, co-parenting disputes are deeply personal and often should remain private. On the other, once accusations are made publicly, they invite public judgment. That tension is difficult to navigate and often unfair to all parties involved. Importantly, there have been no publicly released court findings confirming abandonment or neglect. No custody orders have been shared. No child welfare involvement has been documented publicly. What exists are claims, not conclusions. Yet the impact of those claims is real. The word abandoning carries legal and emotional weight. Even when used colloquially, it suggests intentional detachment, not scheduling conflict. That's why critics latched onto it so quickly, provides a moral anchor for outrage from a media analysis perspective. This is a classic escalation pattern. A personal accusation becomes publicly claimed involves children's allows interpretation, becomes moral certainty. At no point does this require verification to go viral. This part of the story isn't about determining who is right or wrong. It's about understanding why this allegation resonated so deeply and why it's so difficult to counter once it takes hold. In the next part, we'll examine how parenting accusations are weaponized online. Why hasn't seen them in weeks is such a powerful phrase, and how audiences often confuse co-parenting conflict with proof of neglect. Parenting allegations are different from almost every other type of controversy. They don't need proof to spread, and they don't wait for context to land. Once children are mentioned, the internet reacts from instinct, not investigation. That's exactly why the claims aimed at Erika Kirk escalated so quickly and so aggressively. The phrase doing most of the damage is simple: hasn't seen them in weeks. That line is powerful because it's specific, visual, and emotional. It allows people to imagine absence. It invites judgment without requiring evidence. And when paired with the word abandoning, it stops sounding like a scheduling dispute and starts sounding like neglect, even though no authority has made that determination. This is how parenting allegations become weaponized. Online. Nuance collapses into binaries: present or absent, good parent or bad parent, sacrifice or selfishness. Co-parenting realities, travel schedules, custody rotations, legal agreements disappear. What remains is a moral test. And the audience appoints itself as judge. That's why this allegation stuck. It wasn't framed as confusion or conflict. It was framed as failure. The ex didn't say, "We disagree on schedules." He allegedly said she abandoned her kids. That word removes gray areas. It tells the audience how to feel before they can ask questions. Another reason this stuck is the nanny narrative. Nannies are common, but they are also symbolically charged online. For critics, a nanny becomes shorthand for emotional distance. Even when that assumption is unfair. The presence of a caregiver gets reframed as replacement rather than support. Supporters argue that this framing is outdated and sexist, that working parents, especially women, are punished for the same choices men are excused for. That argument is valid, but it struggled to break through because the allegation wasn't about employment. It was about absence over time. Time-based accusations are hard to rebut publicly. You can't easily prove you were somewhere without exposing private details. And even if you do, skeptics question the motive. This creates a no-win scenario. Respond and violate privacy, or stay silent and let assumptions grow. Silence, once again, played a major role. At the time the allegation spread, there was no public clarification from Erika about visitation schedules or custody terms. That silence doesn't confirm anything, but online, silence often gets interpreted as avoidance. The audience assumes that if the claim were false, it would be easy to disprove. That assumption is flawed, but persistent. Another reason the claim spread is pattern bias, because Erika was already facing criticism in other areas. Some viewers connected unrelated controversies into a single narrative: irresponsible, evasive, detached. This is a common cognitive shortcut when multiple criticisms exist. People assume they share a root cause. That's dangerous, especially in parenting discussions. Once a parent is framed as neglectful, every action gets reinterpreted. Public appearances become evidence of selfishness. Professional commitments become proof of misplaced priorities. Even neutral behavior becomes suspect. This is how reputational damage compounds. It's also important to note that ex-partner allegations are uniquely persuasive. Because they imply access to private truth, audiences assume they would know. But co-parenting conflicts are often deeply biased, emotionally charged, and strategic. Exes don't speak from neutral ground. That doesn't make their claims false, but it does mean they're not objective. Online culture rarely accounts for that. Instead, elevates the most emotionally compelling version of events. And in this case, the most compelling version is a parent accused of choosing visibility over presence. What's missing from the discourse are verifiable facts. No custody schedules have been shared. No court findings have been cited. No third-party confirmation exists publicly, yet the absence of facts hasn't slowed the narrative. Because parenting allegations don't need facts to move. They move on values. People project their own standards, fears, and expectations onto the situation. That projection becomes certainty. This is why these allegations are so difficult to counter. Even if clarified later, the emotional impression lingers. Once someone has imagined children being left behind, it's hard to unimagine it, even if the image was incomplete or inaccurate. This part of the story isn't about deciding who is right. It's about recognizing how easily parenting accusations become tools of public judgment, and how quickly they harden into identity labels. In the next part, we'll examine whether silence helps or hurts in situations like this, why many parents choose not to respond publicly, and how the internet often mistakes privacy for guilt. When parenting allegations go public, the person at the center is forced into an impossible decision tree. Speak up and risk exposing children to public scrutiny, or stay silent and risk being labeled guilty by default. That's the bind now facing Erika Kirk. It's why situations like this rarely resolve cleanly online. From the outside, the solution seems simple: just explain. But parenting isn't a press conference, and custody arrangements aren't public relations assets. They're legal, private, and often protected by court orders precisely to keep children out of public conflict. When an ex makes allegations publicly, responding with details can violate agreements, inflame tensions, or create permanent digital records children will one day see. That's why many parents choose silence, not because they're hiding something, but because privacy is the only protection left. The internet doesn't reward that choice. Silence is interpreted as evasion. Viewers assume that if an allegation were false, it could be disproven instantly. They underestimate how complex and constrained responses can be when minors are involved. A parent may be unable to share calendars, locations, or custody terms without legal risk. Yet online discourse rarely accounts for those constraints. This is where parents often lose no matter what they do. If Erika responds with specifics, Critics will say she's exploiting her children to save her image. If she stays quiet, critics will say she's avoiding accountability. If she offers a general statement, "I love my kids and this isn't true," it's dismissed as hollow. Each option carries reputational cost. Another layer complicating this moment is asymmetry. The ex can allege broadly without proof, while the parent accused must meet an unspoken standard of evidence to be believed. That imbalance is common in public disputes. Accusations travel light. Defenses travel heavy. Add social media to the mix, and the imbalance widens. Algorithms favor emotionally charged claims, not measured explanations. A single sentence, "hasn't seen them in weeks," outperforms a nuanced response every time. The platform incentives push parents toward either oversharing or disappearing, neither of which actually serves children. There's also the legal reality of co-parenting conflict. Many custody agreements include non-disparagement clauses or restrictions on public commentary. Even when they don't, attorneys often advise clients to avoid statements that could be used against them later. A calm silence that protects long-term outcomes can look terrible in the short term. Short-term optics, however, dominate online judgment. This is why audiences often mistake privacy for guilt. They assume transparency is always possible and always virtuous. In parenting disputes, transparency can be harmful. It can escalate conflict, provoke retaliation, and entrench positions that courts later have to unwind. Supporters of Erika argue that this is exactly why a public response hasn't come. They say protecting the children requires restraint, even if that restraint costs reputation points. Critics counter that restraint looks convenient when the accusation is damaging. Both views can coexist. That tension fuels the debate. Another factor is credibility drift. Once someone is criticized in one area, silence in another feels cumulative. People begin to read patterns where there may only be proximity. That's not fair, but it's common. The mind prefers coherence, even if it has to invent it. What's missing from most conversations is the time dimension. Parenting is not measured in weeks-long snapshots. It's measured across months and years, across custody rotations and work cycles. A claim about weeks may be true within a narrow window and misleading across a longer view. Without context, the audience fills in the gaps, and those gaps harden quickly. There's also the ethical question of who benefits from a public response. If the ex's claims gain traction, responding publicly can amplify them further. Sometimes the least harmful move is to deny the story oxygen and let it burn out. That strategy works only if attention moves on, which isn't guaranteed. In cases like this, outcomes are rarely public vindication or public condemnation. More often, the story fades, leaving behind a residue of doubt that never fully clears. That residue is the price of choosing privacy in a public arena. This part of the story isn't about declaring a right answer. It's about recognizing why parenting allegations are uniquely corrosive online and why silence, while unsatisfying, is often chosen by parents trying to protect children from becoming content. In the next part, we'll look at what typically resolves these situations, whether through clarification, legal boundaries, or simply time, and why the internet's appetite for certainty often outpaces reality. Stories built around parenting allegations almost never end the way the internet expects them to. There's rarely a viral confession, a dramatic apology, or a clear winner and loser. Instead, they tend to end quietly through process, fatigue, or redirection. And that's likely the path unfolding now around Erika Kirk. The first and most common ending is legal containment. When disputes involve children, courts, not audiences, become the real arena. Co-parenting disagreements are addressed through custody schedules, mediation, or modifications that are intentionally private. Those outcomes don't trend on social media. They don't produce clips. But they do establish boundaries that stop public escalation. Once attorneys advise both sides to stop talking, the noise often drops sharply. This doesn't mean the public learns the truth. It means the public stops being the audience. The second ending is clarification without detail. Sometimes a brief statement appears carefully worded, non-specific, and focused on values rather than facts. It might say that children are loved, that arrangements are being handled privately, and that public speculation is harmful. These statements rarely convince critics, but they give neutral observers permission to disengage. The controversy doesn't end. It loses momentum. Momentum is everything online. The third and most common ending is attention shift. Another story breaks. Another scandal trends. Another headline takes its place. The algorithm moves on. When that happens, unresolved narratives don't get closure, they get archived. People remember there was controversy, but not the details. That ambiguity lingers. But it no longer dominates daily discourse. This is how most internet controversies die. Not by resolution, but by replacement. Why doesn't accountability usually come through public debate? Because parenting allegations are not designed for public adjudication. They rely on partial information and emotional framing. Courts rely on evidence, schedules, and documented behavior across time. Those two systems don't speak the same language. Another reason these stories fade is diminishing returns. Once this same accusation has been repeated without new information, engagement drops. Viewers get fatigue. Commentators move on to fresher content. Even outrage has a shelf life. For the people involved, that's often the goal. Critics sometimes interpret fading attention as proof that allegations were ignored or covered up. Supporters interpret it as vindication. In reality, it's neither. It's the natural life cycle of a story that can't produce new facts without violating privacy. There's also a deeper reason. These stories stop, children grow up. Parents become more protective, not less. They lock down access. They reduce exposure. Over time, the cost of public conflict outweighs the benefit of public sympathy. Silence becomes not just strategy, but necessity. For Erika Kirk, that likely means choosing long-term stability over short-term narrative control. That choice won't satisfy critics, but it aligns with how most parents ultimately respond when children are involved. This doesn't mean allegations evaporate. They remain searchable. They resurface occasionally. But without fresh material, they lose power. The hardest truth for audiences is this: closure is rare. The internet wants endings. Parenting disputes offer processes. Those processes don't stream well. What actually brings these stories to a stop isn't proof or apology. It's limits, legal limits, emotional limits, and attention limits. Once those limits are reached, the story can't grow anymore. And when a story can't grow, it shrinks. This final part isn't about defending or condemning anyone. It's about understanding why the loudest phase of a parenting controversy is almost never the most accurate and why the quiet phase, though unsatisfying, is where real life resumes at this point. The story isn't really about one accusation anymore. It's about how fast the internet decides who a parent is based on fragments, claims, and silence. Because once words like abandoning and hasn't seen them in weeks enter the conversation, they don't wait for court orders, they don't wait for custody schedules, and they don't wait for context. They attach themselves to a name and let the audience fill in the blanks. And that's where things get dangerous. Public pressure can feel like accountability, but it can also become judgment without evidence. If an ex feels unheard, should going public be the solution? Or does that turn children into leverage in a fight that should stay private? And on the other side, if you're being accused publicly, how do you defend yourself without exposing your kids to permanent digital damage? Silence looks guilty. Speaking looks selfish. Explaining looks defensive. There is no winning move once parenting becomes content. That's why this story hits a nerve. Not because we know the truth, but because so many people project their own fears, values, and experiences onto it. Some see neglect. Others see a working parent being punished. Both sides feel justified. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The internet isn't built to protect children. It's built to reward outrage. So before you take a side, Ask yourself this: would you want your worst parenting accusation debated by strangers who only know you through clips and captions? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not to attack, but to reflect. Share this if you believe children deserve privacy more than adults deserve clicks. Because once a narrative sticks online, it rarely asks who it hurts along the way.